Please watch the video until the end to experience the full reveal of this tale. Chapter 1. The Gallery at Northbridge. People kept telling me that the neighborhood had a memory like a wound. They said history bled into the concrete, that every boarded window and every new storefront carried a rumor you could scrape off if you were patient enough. My name is Elias Hart. I came to Northbridge as a painter, a graduate student with a camera and a grant that smelled like optimism. I told myself I'd make art that acknowledged the past without getting stuck in it. The gallery where I rented a studio was half a relic, half a renovation. Its landlord had been a developer for longer than anyone could remember. He talked about bringing life back in a voice that tasted of glass and profit. The back room of the gallery held a pile of discarded things. Old frames, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall, and a wooden cabinet scarred by time. The mirror was my favorite. Its silver had darkened in veins, and when you looked at it, you could catch your reflection layered over other shapes. A twisting staircase, a rusted bicycle, faces pressed in like watermarks. When I ran my fingers across its frame, I felt, absurdly, like I was touching something that had been touched before me. The neighborhood knew a name for the shadow that threaded through its alleys. They whispered it in different ways. A folklore, a warning, a dare. People were careful with their stories, and I, of course, leaned closer because my art needed a spine. I wanted a piece that would make people look back at the city and reckon with what it had lost. I wanted to pull that wound into the light. Chapter 2. The First Whisper. They called the thing the broker, an ugly, unofficial name I heard on late-night bus rides and in the hollows of boarded rooms. Some said he had traded favors for lives. Others insisted he was only a scare parents used to keep children from wandering. In every telling, there was the same small, terrible detail. He answered to his name when it was called in a reflection. They said the broker would come if you looked him in a mirror and said his name 5 times, and every time someone tried, a price would be levied, sometimes on the speaker, sometimes on someone connected to them. I laughed at first. People like to invent monsters to pin their guilt onto. Still, the mirror in my studio changed the texture of late nights. I began to notice how my own reflection lagged, how it seemed to hesitantly reveal things before I did. Old bruises I didn't have, a woman's outline pressed against my shoulder, the outline of a man with brass fingers. I started photographing the mirror, layering images until the people in my photos looked like memory itself. On a storm-thick night, I met Mara, a community organizer who ran a small center 2 blocks away. She was blunt and tired, and when I told her about the mirror, she didn't laugh. She told me about a man who had been in the neighborhood long before the glass was darkened. A tailor, a mediator, someone who traded promises between people until he fell foul of anger and silence. Folks called him many things. One older woman called him a broker in the way a wound is a broker, one who brokers pain into power. Names stick to places, Mara said. Some names remember themselves more than we do. Chapter 3. The Performance. I decided to make the mirror the center of a new installation, an attempt at restorative art, a statement about memory and displacement. The press release used words like reconciliation and reckoning. The neighborhood used words like snake oil. I invited residents to bring objects they feared would be lost when the new condos finished swallowing the block. They brought house keys, photographs, a child's shoe, a hospital bracelet. They handed them to me as if I might stitch them back into the place. On opening night, a crowd pressed into the gallery. The mirror stood on its easel, its surface draped with a black cloth. I had spent weeks painting around it, framing its darkness with images of the streets, the silhouettes of those who had been pushed out. The gallery lights were clinical. The city outside hummed with new construction. We pulled away the cloth together, a theatrical gesture that felt close to an apology. Halfway through the evening, someone shouted a name like a dare. A young man, drunk and daring his friends, cupped his hands and faced the mirror. He said it once, then again, then again. The room held a breath like it held its lanterns. People laughed nervously. Nothing happened. I felt both foolish and thrilled. We were safe, at least for a moment. But later that night, I wound up alone in the studio, and the mirror's silence had grown heavy. The photographs on my walls had begun to shift. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The broker does not attack like a movie villain. He arrives as consequence. At first, it was small things, a neighbor's heat cut off, a grandmother's medicine misplaced, an eviction notice slipped under a door. People blamed bureaucracy, bad timing, coincidence. Then a story surfaced about a man who had been found in an empty lot, his body arranged like a question mark. He hadn't been killed by any visible wound. He had been erased, his identity auctioned in the spaces he'd once occupied. The story moved through the neighborhood like a contagion. I began to see the ledger of trades. Someone I'd photographed in a portrait lost her job, and 3 days later, her apartment. A mural I'd painted to honor a family was painted over by a construction crew that swore they'd never seen it. The gallery's landlord smiled as cranes moved in blocks away. He promised investment. He said art had done its work. He failed to mention the ledger. Mara grew increasingly furious. She accused me of being complicit, that my art gentrified the pain it sought to show. You put a spotlight on people, and then the light gets sold, she said. You made the name into a product. I wanted to defend myself. I had put my life into this piece. But late one night, as I developed a photograph in the darkroom beneath the gallery, I watched the emulsion bloom into an image I did not remember taking. A man with brass-threaded fingers standing behind me, smiling like payment. Chapter 5, The Bargain. The broker doesn't demand coin. He demands names. He rearranges the ledger of who belongs. Each name he takes unmoors someone else. At the community center, people started refusing to say the neighborhood's old names aloud. They wrote them in notebooks and locked them away. They stopped saying the broker's name. Though the temptation to speak, it was like hunger. One evening, Mara pushed a photograph across my studio table. It was an old image of a protest, a crowd holding signs against a factory that had bankrupted the block decades before. In the center, a man with a tailored coat directed people as if he were counting them. He brokered deals and he brokered lies, she said. But the ledger is real, and it remembers what we try to forget. I started hearing my own name echoed back to me in places where I'd never spoken it. On construction fences, in the murmured speakers of delivery trucks. The mirror grew more vivid, and sometimes, if I was patient enough and smelled the right mixture of paint and street rain, I could see exchanges like small rituals. A name in a ledger, a knock on a door, someone's luggage pulled into a truck at dawn. I tried to stop photographing the mirror. It became harder to do everything else. I made a decision I thought would help. I wrote the broker's name on a piece of cardboard and burned it. I told myself that erasure by fire was symbolic and symbols mattered. The smoke tasted like last year's promises. Something in the dark laughed. Chapter 6, The Unraveling. After the fire, the ledger started to leak. Names appeared where they shouldn't, inscribed into the glass of new shop windows, written in dust on tin and cooktops, whispered into the static of morning radio. People began to vanish in ways that bent language. A friend who had fought for tenant rights simply stopped answering. His plants wilted in the window, and then the apartment went dark. Another woman who had been a pillar of the block was found living in a city 2 hours away, with no memory of how she got there. The gallery held a meeting. The landlord insisted we keep the installation up because it had drawn a crowd, because controversy sells. Mara, furious, proposed we take it down and return the mirror to the back room where it belonged. I argued both sides until I realized neither argument was mine. I had painted the mirror into a story, and now the story demanded its own audience. One night, exhausted, I stood before the mirror and watched my reflection split into 1,000 small mirrors, each containing a face. Some I knew, some I did not. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold and patient. The face in the mirror smiled without moving its mouth and mouthed a name that was not mine. It promised to restore what had been lost if I would only trade a pound of my voice. I thought of the old houses, of children who had to cross twice to get to school, of mothers who worked 3 jobs. I thought of my art and how it had been used as a compass for profit. I thought of the ledger. I said the name once in the dark. Chapter 7, Ledger and Blood. Saying a name is not like flipping a switch. Saying a name sets a hinge in motion. The streetlights outside my window blinked as though a curtain was being drawn. The mirror broke its silence. It did not crack with the sound of glass, but with the sound of a ledger snapping shut. People started to return. Not all at once, and not whole. Some came back with the edges of their lives shaved away, memories missing like teeth, relationships eroded at the roots. Others came back with new names stitched into their language, trophies of a bargain they did not remember making. The development project stalled for months after several investors pulled out inexplicably. Profit evaporated like spilled mercury. The landlord swore he had been ruined. Mara said I had paid enough. But vaults of obligation do not empty easily. When the broker is sated, he does not leave, he sleeps in the seams of the place that named him. I learned, with a kind of private horror, that the ledger kept rewriting itself whenever people tried to fix it. Every attempt to correct the injustices led to a hollow where something else could be taken. My art had become a mirror in a house of broken mirrors. Every reflection prescribed a different loss. In the end, I took the mirror to the river, to the old place where the city used to dump its secrets. I thought to leave it there, to sink the glass and let the water carry everything away. But when I tossed it, the mirror did not sink. It hung on the surface like a face at the center of a pond, and the name I had whispered rose again from the water in voices I could no longer separate from my own. I'm telling you this not because I believe stories can save us, but because stories are how we mark where we went wrong. The broker still walks in reflections. He occupies the space between saying and not saying, between holding a memory and letting it go. Some nights I dream that the ledger opens and the names spill out, and among them is my own, written in the cramped handwriting of someone who thought they were doing right. If you find a mirror whose silver has been eaten by shadow, do not make a show of it. Do not perform for the hungry. If a crowd urges you to say a name, resist. The ledger will listen. The city remembers what it was forced to forget, and sometimes memory returns for payment. Please subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give a like to the video, comment your thoughts, and share the video with friends who love horror.